from about 2008. Some of you may have attended this training before. I'm kind of personally of the mindset that even if I've gone to a training before, there's always something that I can learn. We all come to training with different things in our lives, different experiences, parenting roles, professionals, whatever it is. And even if you have maybe heard the material before, if you're open, kind of open your window of tolerance a little bit, you're always going to walk away with something. You're always going to walk away with a new aha. You're always going to walk away with maybe a new handout that maybe wasn't relevant for you before, some information that maybe you heard before but this time really kind of makes sense for you based on what's going on with your life. So if you have attended this training before, I just ask you to kind of open that window a little bit. You know, there's always something, and so hopefully you will be able to get your aha, your at least one aha before the end of the third session. That's at least my goal, and I know the goal of most trainers that are out there. So this training is also, we kind of call it a level 1 or a foundational training. It was originally designed for mental health professionals. It was created with the mindset that we wanted to enhance the knowledge base of professionals who may be working with and supporting adoptive families. And so and I know when I worked at the Adoption Exchange from 2008 to 2012, trained a number of individuals in this training. And then the feedback that we started getting was, you know, this information is really good and it's really helpful and it really does kind of lay that foundation, but we really kind of want to get some more. We want to kind of dig deeper. We want to kind of get more into the how trauma impacts the brain and impacts development and why our kids have some of the behaviors that they have. And so in 2009, I actually sat down and created the curriculum for what we call the Adopt Care Advanced Training. And the Advanced Training is an 8-hour training that really kind of takes this foundational material and it really digs deeper. It gets into some of the more science, the neuroscience, the research, some strategies, specific interventions to be able to work with either on a professional level or also as a parent, how to effectively meet the needs of our kids who are really only going to heal in the context of relationships. And so that training we will also be offering via webinar in April. If you haven't seen that information, you can go on the Adoption Exchange website or you could talk to Tara about that if you're interested. So that's also coming up. So again, this is really the foundation, and then the Adopt Care Advanced really kind of, again, digs deeper into some of this information and really kind of pulls some of the current research that's out there with regards to brain development and trauma. So hope you can join us for that too. Really just briefly, because I know that Tara sent out my resume, my information for you guys to take a look at it. Some of you, just to be clear, some of you may know me as Denise Leffingwell. I am the same person, just changed on my last name, but it's still me. Here is my contact information. I make this available readily. I want folks to be able to use me as a resource if I can be of any of assistance to you, whether it's recommendations for a book or some articles or some websites or where can I get more information about that. If you have just any other questions, Tara and I can try to answer those based on, kind of what the topic of your question is. So please keep my email handy. Like I said, I will get back to you. It's one of my pet peeves when folks don't respond in a timely fashion. So please don't hesitate if you have any other questions. A little bit quickly, just to kind of summarize so you guys know where I'm coming from. I like to be as transparent as possible, especially if you're coming to a training and want to know who this trainer is and what's their background. I am a licensed clinical social worker here in Colorado. I'm also a licensed addiction counselor. my career as a social worker started in Southern California working in a group home with adolescent girls in the foster care system, all that had goals of emancipating or aging out of the system. And most of these girls had been in the foster care system for an average of 6 to 7 years. There was a lot of changes that were going on nationally in the child welfare system. And it's, over the last 18, 19 years, it's been really exciting to see those changes. We still have a long way to go, but we're doing a lot better than we used to. So most of my career has kind of been in foster care, kinship, and adoption in a number of different areas. I've worked for a mental health center here in El Paso County. I worked in collaboration with El Paso County Department of Human Services for a number of years and actually started training with them, foster parents who are moving into adoption. I have worked as a caseworker here in Colorado, worked for a child placement agency as a therapist for families, biological parents, as well as the children in the system and their foster, kinship, and adoptive placements. In 2008 to 2012, I worked for the Adoption Exchange here in Colorado. I was the Senior Director of the Education Department, so had the privilege of training a lot of these classes and then also writing some new trainings and being able to travel all over the country, offering information to both caseworkers, mental health professionals, parents, and those that support the families that we work with. The last couple of years, I've still had the privilege of training for the Adoption Exchange, and I also trained for the Colorado State Foster Parent Association here in Colorado as well. And then in my free time, I work at one of the hospitals here in Colorado Springs doing psychiatric or crisis evaluations for patients who are suicidal, homicidal, or under the influence of drugs and alcohol. So just to kind of give you a little bit of a background of kind of where I'm coming from. My heart is adoption. My heart is foster care. So I am always grateful to have an opportunity to be able to share some information, and I learn from you guys every single time I do one of these trainings. So I'm looking forward to some of our discussions. And before we kind of jump into the next slide, I do, again, want to encourage you guys. I'm going to ask you for feedback on some of the slides, kind of what are your thoughts about this? Do you have any, insight about this? I'm going to ask some questions to get your responses, and it really helps me if you can take advantage of using that chat box. I know there's a little bit of a delay, so we are going to try to manage that as best as humanly possible. But again, I look forward to kind of hearing from you guys. And if you have something specific regarding your child, your family, your situation, if it's not something that I can really address here, because I do need to be mindful of the time, and we are going to be done before noon Mountain Time today, go ahead and email me on the side, and I can get back to you about kind of your specific information. And I hope that that makes sense, just so we can make sure that we get through all the information for today. All right. So with that, let's jump into, these are the first slide that you're looking at, the Adopt Care Competencies. The other thing I just want to bring up, Tara was great about emailing you guys the PowerPoint slides as well as the handouts for this session. As she mentioned in her email, it's not required that you print these off, but we've had many, many requests from folks who wanted an opportunity to be able to print out the PowerPoint and the handouts before the webinar. Some people, like myself, still like to have paper in front of us. Some of us are still getting used to the online modality, but you can and you will have an opportunity to print each of the sessions prior to the call if that's something that is helpful for you. If you didn't do it before the training and you do it after, then great. But just want to make sure that you know that we are we provide that if that is something that's important to you. So hopefully you took care of your needs, whether you like it online or you want your paper copies too. Okay, so let's jump into some of the Adopt Care competencies. So these are really, we call them the 7 competencies that we have broken down over the next 3 weeks. So the first part that we're going to talk about is values and assumptions. And this is values and assumptions about adoption, about biological parents, about the children, about adoptive parents, kind of what are the beliefs and values that we bring into the work that we do. And the work being as a parent, as a professional, as a mental health provider. Because the reality is that we all come into our professional lives with ideas, with beliefs, with values, and with assumptions based on our previous experience and our own life story. And we have to be willing and able collectively to kind of put some of those on the table sometimes, because we don't all have the same belief system. We don't all think the same things about adoption. We don't all come from the same mindset about biological parents. And I think in order to really have some courageous conversations with one another, again, depending on what your role is, we have to be willing to first acknowledge that we do have different beliefs and values. And then how can we navigate those waters collaboratively in a way that's ultimately going to meet the needs of the children? So, excuse me, we're going to spend some time talking about values and assumptions. The second modality or competency that we're going to talk about today are characteristics of the child's history and some effective adoptive parenting. Next week, we're going to jump into child development as it relates to adoption, emotional conflicts for the adopted child, briefly kind of touch on some psychosocial issues, common diagnoses, and kind of some recommended treatment strategies when working with an adoptive family. And then the third week, and maybe 5 and 6 might be changed a little bit. We'll see when we get into it in the next couple of weeks. Strategies to address challenges in the adoptive family. That's going to be some case studies. We have a couple in this training, which I really like. And then talk about post-placement support and services. So there's going to be 2 of these competencies we'll talk about today. And then we'll figure out how we're going to divide up the second and third one in the next couple of weeks. But this just kind of gives you an overview of what we're going to talk about. So if you were coming to an in-person training, these are all the competencies that we would be talking about over the course of the day. So just to kind of give you an idea. All right. The first thing that we're going to do, and you guys are, this is going to be, we've done this before, so we can totally do this. This video removed, what we're going to do is mute the phone, and Tara has put in the link to YouTube in the chat box. What I would like you guys to do, and some of you may have seen this before, and I'm going to just gently encourage you to watch it again, because every single time I watch it, there is something new that pops out. It's only about 14 minutes long. Is we are going to have you go ahead and on your own devices, go to YouTube, type in removed, go ahead and watch the video, and then we're going to break for that amount of time, and then I will get back on when the video is over, and then going to ask for some feedback on kind of what stuck out for you, what made you angry, what caused a lump in your throat, something that you don't understand, why did that happen in the video. So just pay attention to those pieces that kind of stick out or come up for you, and then I'm going to ask you just to kind of share your insight when we're done. So go ahead and jump over to YouTube and watch the video. We'll come back in about, I think it's about 14 minutes and 30 seconds. Okay, can everybody hear me? All right. Sorry if the timing was just a little bit off. I wasn't sure when some people were able to start the video. That's kind of one of the dilemmas of doing this when you're all located not in front of me. I have to do my best judgment. So I'm going to go ahead and assume that some of you have probably seen that video. It's been making its rounds for a couple of years now, and really excited that there was a part 2 that we will we'll watch on session 3 to kind of come full circle a little bit, have a little bit of a resolution with Zoe and her brother. So I know a couple people are still watching, so go ahead and keep watching. I'm going to go ahead and just move ahead a little bit just to kind of start a little bit of a dialogue with folks. So what I'm curious to hear from you guys, and you can go ahead and start typing now, and I'll just kind of try to fill some of the dead space, if you will, is something that stuck out for you, something that was really powerful for you. Could be a question that you have about why something happened, or maybe you have some insight on maybe what could have been done differently. That would definitely be of interest for me to hear. But just one thing from the video, as we're talking about kids being removed, their biological parents coming into the system, having not only a ton of grief and loss, and they already have trauma, and then how that plays out in the dynamics of when they are transitioned into new placements, ultimately with strangers. And trying to understand just a little bit. I don't know if most of us can really fathom. I know I certainly wrap my brain around this a lot of time. I try to put myself in what I would be like if I was in the position of some of these children and adolescents. And I honestly don't think I think my behavior would actually be worse if I had to endure all of the changes, all of the loss, not having any control, not having any say really in anything, possibly being split from my siblings. And if I had that role of taking care of my younger siblings and then not knowing where they are, I can't imagine the level of anxiety and worry and fear that Zoe must have been experiencing every minute of every day. So let me start going through. You guys are great. Gosh, it's going to take me a little bit to get through all these comments. So one person's comment is about the scene with the foster mom giving Zoe the dress, and how the dress, unbeknownst to that amazing foster mom, was a trigger to a previous experience that Zoe had had with her biological parents. And then Zoe re-experiencing that trauma in that moment. And I think that scene is probably one of the most powerful visual representations of what a trauma response or a trauma trigger looks like. That mom had no idea, and how many of you that are parents have no idea what the triggers are for your children, and Human Services usually doesn't know all of the potential smells and sights and tastes and touches that could be a potential trigger for children. The only way that we really learn what those are is through experience. And so that scene with the dress and Zoe seeing the dress and then reliving that traumatic experience in her home with her biological parents. And then her response, she aligned a lot with her father in that clip of having the power and having the control and not wanting to be a victim and pushing that parent away. But the key that's important, guys, to remember, and if you're working with families about this, and this when we get into more of how the trauma impacts the brain, the piece that we really have to hammer home, and all of us really have to get a very clear understanding, is that Zoe is not just remembering that experience. She's not just remembering what happened in her biological home with that situation where her mom bought a new dress and her dad was yelling at her and threatening to kill her and I don't care about your dress. It's not just remembering it. It's as if it's happening all over again. It is as she is in that moment, she is reliving and re-experiencing that experience all over again. So it's not just a memory, and I think that's what people forget. It's embedded, it's ingrained in her brain and her body. She was back in her home all over again. And that's a very powerful mechanism, and that's a very powerful experience that our children have sometimes on a very regular basis. And we often, as parents or professionals, don't know what caused it. And we are very quick to want to know the why. And we try to get our kids, when they're dysregulated and they're scared and they're worried and they're maybe reliving a traumatic memory, we want to know why. Why are you doing this? Why is this happening? Why are you screaming in the middle of Walmart on aisle 4? Why are you why? Stop. Just stop asking why. Because typically what happens is our kids in that moment can't tell us anyway, or we get the I don't know, and then that just irritates us even more. It's not necessarily about the why. And depending on when the trauma happened, guys, our children and our adolescents aren't going to be able to tell us anyway, especially if it happened before they were verbal. They're never going to be able to tell us why they're having the meltdown on aisle 4 in Walmart. They just know something doesn't feel right. So our job is to meet them where they are, help them calm down, be a calm, regulated parent, meet them where they're at. They need you to help them calm down and feel safe. That's the best we can do. We're not always going to know why, what happened, when did this happen, who did this. So I'm glad that somebody pointed out the dress scene, because I think that scene is probably, aside from another one that we'll probably talk about in a minute, that is probably one of the best scenes I have ever seen of what really happens to our kids. And then did you guys notice also how quickly she came back around the corner with the dress on? Didn't take very long for her to come back down. Somebody else comments about the small moments of hope and progress that maybe weren't seen, having those acknowledged by foster parents. Absolutely, guys, it's baby steps. It's not all or nothing in this world. We're talking about individuals, human beings. We have to celebrate the baby steps, the improvements. It's not going to be an all or nothing. These behaviors are not going to stop in 2 weeks just because they're in your house now and everything is safe. Some of these behaviors that are, in how I define them, they're adaptive coping mechanisms. A lot of these behaviors that we like to define as maladaptive and inappropriate, switch your viewpoint a little bit. Those behaviors, those inappropriate maladaptive behaviors, in a lot of situations kept our kids alive. So they served a purpose for our children in a certain context. Now when we move them into a foster kinship or adoptive home who doesn't hurt their children and who has boundaries and who feeds their children 5 times a day, our kids are still going to have those behaviors because part of it is who they are. It's what they know. It's their normal. And we now tell them that those are inappropriate and those aren't okay, and we don't do those. So yes, we do have to teach them different ways of coping and adapting, but that takes time. The brain only learns through repetition, and it takes time. And it takes consistency, and it takes follow through every single time. And yes, you're going to feel like a broken record. And then you're going to get so exhausted, and why do I have to keep telling you this? Because we're not talking about typical brains. With your biological children, you probably didn't have to be a broken record. You could maybe tell them once or twice. But your children didn't have the inconsistencies and the trauma and the abuse and the neglect and the domestic violence and the in utero substance exposure. Their brains learn differently. So we have to adapt. This isn't about the kids changing to meet our needs. That's not what this is about. Somebody else talks about a lot of the behaviors really struck me because they're behaviors that I see frequently with children I work with. Absolutely. They're not atypical. Again, how are a lot of those behaviors, how are those behaviors functional for Zoe? So that's really something that I wanted to spend some time on in the advanced curriculum. Is there's a function and a purpose to every behavior, friends. Every behavior has a function and a purpose. And if we really want to be the trauma-informed parents and professionals that I know that we all want to be, if you're in this system, if you're in child welfare, if you're in mental health, working with children and adolescents and adults who have trauma backgrounds, if you really want to be trauma-informed, to really practice what that means, you have to shift your lens. You have to shift how you see things. And one of the first ways to start is to validate and to recognize there is a function to every behavior. It's digging deeper and not just trying to fix the behavior without addressing what's driving the behavior. Where is it coming from? If we don't dig into the trauma to identify what's the function of the behavior, we are only putting a Band-Aid on the behavior. And some of you know what I'm talking about when I say behavior modification and I say sticker charts and I say, rewards and point system. Those might work really well for some children. And those might work really well for a short period of time for some of the children that we're talking about. But if we are not addressing what is driving the behavior, there is not going to be a long-standing change in the behavior. Let's see. There's some questions about the siblings and kind of why they were split up, kind of not understanding why that decision was made. And so here's my perspective on why they did that in this video. Is they put a couple of things in this video, I think, to make you ask questions. Why do we split siblings? Why did Zoe move home to home with her belongings in a black trash bag? Why did that happen? They put it in here because it still does happen. And it happens every day. There's a lot of different reasons why siblings are split up. Sometimes it's because we don't have enough resource families to be able to take sibling groups of children. We split siblings when there might be some concern of safety, when there could be, risk of, harm to one or the other of the siblings. Previously as a caseworker, I had to split siblings even though I didn't want to, because I didn't have enough homes that could take a group of 2 or 3, because they already had other children placed in their home. So I don't know the answer for this particular video why they split the siblings, but I think they put it in there to really just raise some awareness that if we can do a better job of keeping siblings together when at all possible, that we need to be doing that anyway. And Zoe had a very unique role with her younger brother. And again, I can't imagine the level of fear and anxiety that she experienced, not knowing who was he with, and were they taking care of him the way that he needs to be taken care of, and did they know this about him, and did they know that about him, and really only she knew that. So on top of her adjusting to these new foster placements, she is worried sick about her little brother. And if I was in school, I wouldn't be learning and retaining a lot of information, because that would really be all I would focus on, is how is my brother, where is my brother, when am I going to see my brother, is he okay? That anxiety for a child, I can't imagine what that's like. And if you sit and think about it, I hope you guys can take a moment and try to understand what we ask of our children sometimes. It's insurmountable. I'm just reading some more of these as we're going along. Sorry for the delay, guys. All right. So somebody brought up the first foster home placement, and so the situation that kind of plays out where Zoe's placed in the first home. And I don't know if any of you guys kind of picked up on the difference in the kind of the scene and the environment of the first foster home compared to the second foster home. And I'm talking everything about the first foster home. There was like a protective screen, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. But did you notice it was very dark? And did you notice that the foster parent stayed inside of the house? And there didn't seem to be much welcoming or interaction initially when Zoe showed up on their doorstep. And then you guys all saw, she went outside, ate a piece of fruit off a fruit tree in the backyard, which I don't know the last time that she ate. If there's fresh fruit on a tree, I might want to eat it. I don't really mess with food when it comes to children and adolescents who have trauma histories. So if you have a fruit tree in your backyard that maybe you don't want the kids to access, maybe, kind of letting them know that, or putting up, some sort of a, I don't want to say barricade, but, like a netting or something, or, a sign. And then what happened when the foster mom learned that she ate the fruit off the tree, her response, and then Zoe grabbed the record player and threw it over the fence. And then after she threw the record player over the fence, how those particular parents, if you want to call it disciplined or punished her by grabbing her and dragging her, kicking and screaming, and then putting her in a cold shower. And so all I'm going to say about that is it is unfortunate, and it does break my heart when the media only, highlights the negative aspects of foster care and foster parents, because we have amazing and fantastic, and just people who I have the utmost respect for, who open their homes and their hearts to children every day and do amazing work, that we focus on the very small percentage who, really shouldn't be doing it and maybe are doing it for the wrong reasons. But what I also liked about the video was how they contrasted that first home with the second home. And if you noticed, the welcome for the second home, the house was a lot brighter. And I'm not saying, go paint your house or anything like that, but she opened the door, she came outside, she got down on Zoe's level. She said, welcome, I'm really glad that you're here. And this parent seemed to have maybe a bit more training, maybe a bit more understanding about trauma, and that really manifested itself after the dress scene, where she got on the phone and Zoe, left the room, and they want you to think that the foster mom is calling social services to say, this is my notice, you need to come and take Zoe out of my house. And then Zoe comes around the corner wearing the dress, and she sees her on the phone and thinks, oh, okay, now I'm getting moved again. But really that foster mom was on the phone saying, we need to do something different. You need to bring her baby brother to my house. They need to be together. And that's a parent who really gets it, and who was really able to see what happened from a different lens and through a different perspective. So again, I think in a very short video clip, there were a lot of really powerful pieces that were brought to the surface. So again, and I hope that this isn't the only time that you guys watch this video. I hope that you, if you're in this work as a parent or as a professional, that you don't just watch it a couple times. I show this video every single time I do foster parent core training, so I see it all the time, and every single time I watch it there is something else that stands out for me, or something that really solidifies, yeah, that I need to really pay more attention to that. Or just to kind of help me say, don't get stuck in, there's a function to the behavior. Try to figure out what that is, what that might be about. Because that's how kids communicate. That's how teenagers often communicate with us, is through their behaviors. We as adults communicate a lot through our behaviors. We're not that different than children and adolescents. We're really not. And I know sometimes we like to think that we are, but some of us still do some of the same behaviors that kids do. Some of us still lie. And some of us, we'll sit there and we'll say, oh no, I don't. But yes, we do. And then think about it. Why do we lie about things? What's the purpose of it? What's the function of it for us as adults? And it's not that much different than kids. But